What you see here is a photo of my small basement studio. I've turned on the UV lamp so you can see it projecting down onto the table, and that's where I expose my prints. Also, there's the wet table to the right. I have a polyethylene sheet mounted to it, and I use that area for coating my work or any sort of wet chemistry that I have to work with, also for rinsing my prints. And the back table is actually I use that for cutting paper, or it could be anything, you know, hammering or working with mounting the work, etc. So yeah, between the three areas, I can pretty well, you know, complete my work. Although sometimes when I have a number of pieces on the go, I tend to overfill the area, and that's more or less unavoidable at times. This is a shot of exposing the interference print 22. I've got my cyanotype coated paper down below at the base of the table, and then I've placed a glass sheet just above that with a space, and on top of that I have a sculpted piece of window screen that is going to make the photogram. I exposed this one for about 4 minutes. It may vary from 4 minutes. It could be even up to 15 minutes on this lamp. It just depends on, you know, what kind of formulation you're using, or what depth of exposure you want in the print. Alternative is to use sunlight. I have used the sunlight, but you know, if you're placing objects onto your work that can blow around, then it's very difficult. Unless they're flat, then you can put them under a glass sheet. But if they're not flat, it's very difficult to use the external sun when there's any sort of wind in the area. This is interference 22, the same print that you saw being exposed. It's being rinsed. This is the second rinse. There's a little bit of Prussian blue coming out of the print in that image in the tray. Previous to that was a first rinse where most of the iron salts rinse out, and when you do that, you can actually see quite a change in the watercolor. It will be quite yellow on the first rinse. And then after the second rinse, I do a third rinse. I turn the print face down, place it in water for about 20 minutes, and allow the final iron residual salts to rinse out. You want to do that because the iron is it's harmful to the paper over many years. It will make it brittle, and it's not archival if you don't remove the residual iron. Number of my prints, I create interference patterns, and how those are made those are really they're parallel lines printed onto transparencies. I use 36 lines per inch, but when you take two of these sheets and you lay one on top of the other and rotate them, you get a third pattern of interference, and that is what I'm capturing with the cyanotype in these prints. So that pattern is really creating a lot of tonality because it shifts from light to dark very gradually. It's actually a sine pattern, a sinusoidal pattern, in terms of how it goes from bright to dark, or vice versa. So I capture those. I often place them further from the print surface, so the originating lines on them are invisible, but the actual interference pattern is captured on the cyanotype. It's equivalent to an audible beat note. If you have two different notes closely spaced, you end up with a third note being the difference between those two frequencies. This is a similar thing in the visual realm, that you actually see the interference rather than hear it. This is interference print number 1, and I'm just showing it drying. It is actually going to be toned. You can tone cyanotypes using sources of tannin, and I'll show you in the next slide the plant I used. This is sumac growing out, really an outgrowth at the edge of a parking lot. The plant is very abundant in southern Ontario, in many areas in southern Canada, so you can pick it freely. It's a good source of tannin for toning cyanotypes. It makes a nice brown, actually a number of shades of brown depending on how long you tone it for. These are sumac leaves, basically being dried. I put a thin layer of them down on a towel. It takes about 4 days. Once they're dried, you can put them in bags and they will last many years. I have some 5 years old, and they work just as well as the new ones. Here you see the print that you saw earlier, interference 1. It's actually sitting in the tannin solution extracted from the sumac. I typically put the leaves into room temperature water and leave them for a couple of days, and then you can pour that off or strain it, and then place your cyanotype in there after it has been bleached. And I'm not showing the bleaching step. So when you have that blue cyanotype, you're going to bleach it first. You place it into alkaline water, even tap water, for several days. It will bleach out to an orange, and then you place it into your tannin solution and leave it for anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours. And the print will turn varying shades depending on the type of tannin you use. For the sumac tannin, it tends to be quite a chocolate brown color. You can use a number of other tannin sources. Others, printmakers use coffee, tea, grapeseed. It would be a very long list if I was to ring those off now. But yeah, there's lots of possibilities. You can get different shades of brown, black, chocolate, all depending on the source. Also, the level of staining of the highlights is different depending on the source. So there's a lot of variability, and often depending on the paper you're using. So it's not a very predictable, necessarily predictable type of toning. The shades are going to vary. Oddly enough, it seems almost from one day to the other. I have a number of prints in the show. Several of the toned ones I have submitted to a book coming out in the end of next year, written by Annette Golaz. She's an artist living in Switzerland, and her book is exclusively on toning of cyanotypes. So I hope if you ever go in this direction that you might consider that might be a useful resource for learning more. If you're interested in seeing a wide variety of the types of works produced in this genre, Cameraless Photography by Martin Barnes is very good. It showcases a large number of artists working with these techniques. It's less technical, but more a showcase book of their works, and it is definitely worth taking a look at.